A small airplane dropped me on a long red dirt airstrip at the far end of the airstrip. At the other end, which was almost a mile away, there was at least one substantial building, but the pilot had been instructed, drop him off at the far end of the runway. So there I was. I looked around. There was no welcoming committee. I was all alone, half a world away from my home in Indiana. As the airplane taxied away from me, the pilot looked out and said, "Son, this is a war zone. Watch out for the bad guys. And remember, sometimes the good guys are bad guys." I was all alone and I was thinking, I would be happy to see any guy right now, good or bad. It was 1966. I had just completed a journey, 60-hour journey from my home in Indiana via Indianapolis, Chicago, San Francisco, Honolulu, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Saigon, Bangkok, and then to Vientiane, Laos, the capital of Laos. Why was I there? Because President John Kennedy told our young generation of Americans that with United States dollars, with US technology, and with US goodwill, we could change the world. And tens of thousands of us went overseas as volunteers. I was assigned to Vientiane, Laos, the land of 1,000,000 elephants, to teach English to an ethnic minority, the Hmong, in northeast Laos, somewhere up around the North Vietnamese border. There I was in Laos, standing at the end of that airstrip, wondering what I should do, thinking, Paul, what have you gotten yourself into? And then I saw a green Jeep coming down the middle of the runway. It stopped right in front of me. And this American looked at me. He looked kind of like Jimmy Durante, a grizzled American. And he growled at me, "Are you the new teacher?" "Yes, if you're the new teacher, you see that trail right there at your feet?" "Yes, I get on that trail. It'll take you all the way over yonder to the foot of that mountain where those buildings are. That's the school, and that's where you belong." He said, "There are things that happen up here on this airstrip that you don't want to know about, that you don't want to see. So get your butt," although he was not quite as delicate as I was, "over to the school and keep it over there. I don't ever want to see you up here at this airstrip." So what could I do? I started down that trail towards the school. About halfway there was an open air market. This was going to be my first encounter with the Hmong. The men were wearing black Chinese style pajamas. The women also wore pajamas, but they had beautifully embroidered skirts on top of those pajamas. It was like a National Geographic magazine come to life. And I was starting to feel a little bit like Margaret Mead. But then I noticed my surroundings. There were several women sitting on dirty blankets. They were selling food. There was chopped up, bloody, fly-ridden pieces of meat and really ugly looking liquids. And the stench of that market was terrible. But worse than that, the women, all of the women had military carbines, M1 carbines. The men not only had those rifles, but they had pistols and even the biggest knives that I had ever seen. And that pilot's words came back to me. This is a war zone. But that wasn't the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing that I saw in that market was that not one person in the market gave me a smile, or offered a handshake, or give me a gesture of friendship. It was like being in a surreal picture. I was in the middle of that surreal picture, and I really felt afraid. So I ran out of the market, and I ran all the way to the school. When I got to the school, there was no welcoming committee there either. So I sat on a step in front of a dilapidated school building, saying, Paul, what have you got yourself into? It seemed like an eternity, but eventually a small boy approached me and motioned for me to come with him. He took me to this bamboo and thatch hut and told me to go in. So I got to the entrance and I turned around to thank the boy, and he had disappeared already. So I went inside of that bamboo thatched hut. One room, no furniture. On the bamboo floor, there was a metal dish with a handful of rice or so. And in the wall, there was an open window that had probably been hacked there by one of those big knives. So I stood there at the window and I looked out, and for a moment I was swept away with the beauty of that broad valley and the serenity of those distant mountains. But then I also learned something when you live in the mountains. The sun went down behind the mountain, and as soon as it did, the world went dark, pitch black. It was so dark that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And panic set in. I started to hyperventilate. I had never been in a place in my entire life where I couldn't just hit a switch and turn on a light. So I stood there at the window shaking, and I saw something. At the far end of the valley in the sky, there was a bright light. It flashed. It was hypnotic. Then there was another and another. And as I listened, I could hear this sound. Woomph. Woomph. I thought of the pilot's words. This is a war zone. I thought, is that sound a cannon or a mortar? And are those flashes in the sky military flares? Are we under attack? The North Vietnamese, are they attacking us? I felt like I needed to run, but I had no idea where to run to. So I just stood there and I watched. And there were more lights and more lights and more lights. And then it looked like those lights were snaking through the sky. I had an aha moment. Torches. Hmong villagers walking down a trail at the far end of the mountain. Wow, that was a comforting thought. We were not under attack. So I spread out on that bamboo floor. I ate some of that tasteless rice, and I tried to go to sleep. And just as sleep was coming, whoa! I was jarred to my feet. I rushed to the window, and there, in the schoolyard, I could see dozens, perhaps 24, flaming torches. They were coming up the hill from the school and heading right for my hut. And the sound, now I could hear more. Woof! Woo! Woof! Woo! Fear made sweat break out on my forehead. Sweat was running down my back. My heart was pounding. My brain was racing. What happened in that marketplace? Did a child see me and suddenly die? Or did a woman of Bart, seeing this dark-skinned, unwelcome stranger in their midst? I was standing there shaking, but those torches were getting closer, and they were circling the hut that I was in. And the circles kept getting tighter and tighter. And through the flickering light of those torches, I could see those men's faces, their sweaty faces, their angry eyes, and the sound, woof! Woo! I was sure that I was going to die in that bamboo hut on that night. I knew I was going to die. would they take those torches and torch the hut and burn it down with me in it? Or would they take those big knives and chop my skin and into those meaty chunks of bloody? I could hardly breathe. And I was thinking, oh, what have you got yourself into? Will your parents ever know what happened to you? I don't know what you have done in that situation, but I can tell you what I did. I found religion. I looked up and I said, God, Father in heaven, please, please, please help me make it through the night. And that prayer was answered. Because as I watched, that scene started to fade away and then go dark as I fell down and hit the floor unconscious. I don't know if it was fear or exhaustion or shock or whatever reason. There was mercy as I fell unconscious. When I opened my eyes again, I felt heat on my head. It was sunlight coming from an opening in the bamboo. I felt my body. Am I in one piece? I was in one piece. And I thought, maybe that was just a nightmare. So I went outside of the hut. I could smell the scent of kerosene from those burning torches, and I could see footprints all around my hut. I walked down to the school. Children were playing in the schoolyard, and teachers started to come out. One of them spoke English. Mr. Paul, so sorry. Yesterday, no meet you. Hmong pilot, shot down by North Vietnamese communists. He crashed and died. His body at hospital. All villagers go to the hospital. They take his body and return it to home next to you. I couldn't believe it. The wails, the drums, the torches had nothing to do with me. Those Hmong were not KKK, as I thought. They weren't coming to lynch me or burn the house down or chop me into pieces. They were mourning a fallen hero. That stuff about the KKK and lynching, that was my mental baggage that I brought with me. So what I learned from that experience, that fiery night of terror, my first night in Laos, was that we often carry really heavy baggage with us. And when you're carrying heavy baggage, it makes the trip not very pleasant. But if you just let go of that baggage, it frees your hands. And when your hands are free, you can free your heart. And you can free your mind. And when you do that, the journey is far more pleasant, is far more meaningful, and certainly is far less shockful than when you're carrying all of that baggage with you. I learned that, and I've used it over 40 years in the Foreign Service. A wonderful lesson taught to me on that terrible, terrible night where I asked for God to just help me make it through the night.